Today, we are digging into a truly foundational idea from the father of economics himself, Adam Smith. And let me tell you, it's an idea that might just flip everything you think you know about why you pay so much in rent.
It's the question we all ask ourselves, right? It doesn't matter if you're in a tiny studio apartment or a big house, the cost of just having a roof over your head feels like it's always on the rise. We usually point the finger at greedy landlords or maybe the crazy costs of building materials. But what if the real reason is something else entirely?
Well, over 200 years ago, Adam Smith turned this whole idea on its head. He basically said, you've got it all backwards. It's not that your high rent is making everything you buy more expensive. Nope, it's that high prices for goods are what create your high rent in the first place. I know, it's a bit of a mind bender. So let's break it down.
Okay, to really get our heads around this, we have to kind of forget what we think the word rent even means. For Smith, it wasn't just some bill you pay every month. It was more like the final prize in a big economic game, the leftover value that everyone is fighting for.
Here is the absolute key to it all. Smith saw rent as the surplus. So picture a farmer. After she's paid for everything, her seeds, her tools, her workers, and even taken a fair profit for herself, whatever cash is left over from selling the crops, that is what the landlord can claim as rent. It's the maximum amount that can possibly be squeezed out of the land. And this just completely flips the script. We tend to think of rent as just another business cost, like wages that gets baked into the final price of a loaf of bread. But Smith says, no. Rent is the result. If the market price of corn suddenly skyrockets, that farmer has a much bigger surplus after all her costs are paid. And guess who gets to claim that new pile of cash? The landowner. So high prices literally create the money that becomes rent.
So, you might be wondering, where does this magical surplus come from in the first place? For Adam Smith, it all starts with the one thing essential to human life: food. This is the bedrock of his entire argument. Why food? Simple. People have to eat. There is always going to be a demand for food. It's not like a coal mine that might be too expensive to even bother digging, or a forest full of timber that nobody wants to buy. Land that grows food will almost always generate some kind of value.
And here's the simple but incredibly powerful logic behind it. Even the most basic piece of farmland produces more food than the people working on it need just to stay alive. That extra food, that's the original form of wealth. That's the surplus. And since the landlord owns the land itself, they have the power to claim that surplus. That's rent.
You can think of this food surplus as the essential battery pack for an entire economy. It's the stored-up energy that allows a society to do so much more than just scrape by day to day.
And once that economic battery is charged, well, society is no longer stuck in survival mode. It can start to build, to diversify, and to create a truly complex economy.
Think about it. When farming gets so efficient that, let's say, half the population can feed everybody, what happens to the other half? They're free. They don't have to work in the fields anymore. They can become carpenters, miners, weavers, all sorts of different things. This is the birth of industry, and it's all powered by that original surplus of food.
But, and this is a really key distinction, the land where you might find minerals or timber, that land only generates rent if people want those things badly enough to pay a high price. Unlike food, there's no built-in guaranteed demand. So the rent from a quarry or a mine is totally dependent on the whims of the market.
Now, Smith knew this all sounded pretty radical, so he used this brilliant historical example to prove his point: the relationship between money, in this case silver, and the real value of food, represented by corn.
He looked at 400 years of prices. For the first couple of centuries, silver got more and more valuable. A single ounce could buy you more and more corn every year. But then, bam! Miners in the Americas hit the mother lode. They discovered these vast silver deposits, the market was flooded with it, and the value of silver just collapsed. All of a sudden, it took way more silver to buy the exact same amount of corn.
You can see this dramatic swing right here. What changed wasn't the corn. People still needed to eat just as much. What changed was the value of the money itself. It showed just how volatile and unpredictable a currency could be. And this leads to a pretty profound conclusion. Money can be fickle. Smith was arguing that true value, real value, is tied to what actually sustains human life and labor. A nation's real wealth isn't its pile of gold or silver, but its power to produce the necessities of life. So this brings us to the final and, you could argue, the most provocative part of Smith's analysis. If rent is tied to how well the whole nation is doing, then whose interests are actually aligned with everyone's prosperity?
Smith divided society into three main groups. First, you've got the landowners, who live off of rent. Their interest is directly tied to society's success, because as the country gets richer, demand for everything goes up, and so does their rent. Second, you have the laborers, who live off wages. They obviously benefit from more jobs and higher pay when society is booming. And then there's the third group, the merchants and manufacturers, who live off profit, and Smith had a special warning about them. He warned that the interest of this third group is always to widen the market and narrow the competition. Now, widening the market can be great for everyone, but narrowing the competition, creating monopolies or cartels, that hurts the public by jacking up prices. So their interest isn't always the same as the public good.
And this brings us right back to Smith's ultimate conclusion. Pretty much every single improvement in a society, a new invention, better roads, more trade, all of it tends to raise the real value of land. And that new value, which was created by the efforts of the whole society, is ultimately captured as rent by the landowner. Which leaves us with a really powerful question for our own time. When we see progress, when our cities grow and our economy expands, who is actually capturing the value that all of us helped to create? Adam Smith gave us this framework more than 2 centuries ago, and it really forces us to look at our world today and ask what has changed and what hasn't.